Good morning. This hearing will now come to order. As this meeting is fully virtual, we must address a few housekeeping matters, and I will read the opening verbatim. For today's meeting, the chair or staff is designated by the chair or staff designated by the chair may mute participants' microphones when they are not under recognition for the purposes of eliminating inadvertent background noise. Members are responsible for muting and unmuting themselves. If you notice you have not unmuted yourself, I will ask you if you would like the staff to unmute you. If you indicate approval by nodding, staff will unmute your microphone. I remind all members there's a technology issue. We will move to the next member until the issue is resolved, and you will retain the balance of your time. You will notice a clock on your screen that will show how much time is remaining. At 1 minute remaining, the clock will turn to yellow. At 30 seconds remaining, I will gently tap the gavel to remind members that their time is almost expired. When your time is expired, the clock will turn to red and I will begin to recognize the next member. In terms of speaking order, we will follow the order set forth in the House rules, beginning with the chair and ranking member, then members present at the time of the hearing is called to order will be recognized in the order of seniority, and finally, members not present at the time of the hearing is called to order. Finally, House rules require me to remind you that we have set up an email address to which members can send anything they wish to submit in writing at any of our hearings or markups. That email address has been provided in advance to your staff. Okay, that's the end of the technical strip. So we can go ahead and open this up. Well, I'm very excited to be having today's hearing in our committee. It's a really important time to talk about some of the exciting developments in the forest product industry. This industry is critical to my state, and I know it is to many others in this country. Just as an aside, our state is 90% forested. We're the most forested state in the nation. And unlike a lot of Western states, we are mostly 90% privately owned, so quite a difference. As another small aside, I just want to say I live on a 200-acre piece of property that's covered by an old-growth spruce fir forest. So I spent much of my life around forestry and harvesting, and we know some of the challenges that are happening given the droughts that we're experiencing now, the invasive species, the end of the useful life of many of these trees, and the importance of replanting and harvesting for good use. So we have a lot of engagement in that. So there are a lot of innovations in sustainable climate-friendly products that really could be important to reinvigorate a sector hit hard by reduced demand for certain traditional wood products like pulp and paper. We certainly know in our state the heartbreak of losing a paper mill, losing the jobs, losing the heart of the community. So these innovations and new markets are particularly important to us, as they have been in many other places. The nice thing about this emerging market for climate-friendly products, it's also a good opportunity to promote rural job growth. Today's hearing will explore the ways in which an innovative new forest products could function as excellent alternatives to traditional materials while also being climate friendly, because they are renewable resources and they store carbon once in buildings. We'll have a chance to discuss mass timber and how the widespread adoption of new timber products in the construction industry could have a major impact on the carbon footprint of the construction industry as a whole. Research shows that wood products can have multiple layers of benefits. In an Agriculture Policy Committee hearing that was held last year, Michael Gergen of the Endowment for Forestry and Communities testified about the potential for biodegradable and recyclable food packaging made from forest products. The University of Maine has participated in this research, and I'm pleased that one of our witnesses today is from the University of Maine and can tell us more about projects like this. Coincidentally, last week we held a hearing on plastic waste and recycling, and we learned that plastic pollution causes the global economy over $1.5 trillion a year due to impacts on a variety of sectors. Packaging alternatives created from forest products could help solve some of this crisis. Much of the innovation in the wood industry is credited to the research and support provided by the Forest Service. In the fiscal year 2021, we appropriated $20.3 million for the Forest Products Laboratory. FPL's research ranges from fiber and chemical science to composites, and its work has allowed a wide range of wood products to emerge and develop into viable consumer products, from nanocellulose enhanced flooring to wood cellulose supporting films and electronics to advanced composites and many things in between. I look forward to hearing how we can continue to support progress and innovation in the wood products industry through support of the Forest Service. So, to discuss this important issue, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Cindy West from the U.S. Forest Service and the Director of the Forest Products Laboratory in the Northern Research Station. Joining Dr. West today are three witnesses with a deep knowledge of forest products development and research into emerging products and their uses in construction. Dr. Stephen Shaler, Director and Professor at the School of Forest Resources at the University of Maine, representing FOR Maine. Mark Brinkmeyer, owner of the Idaho Forest Group, representing the Idaho Forest Products Commission. And our final witness is Dean Peter McKeith, joining us this morning, and we are very fortunate to have him introduced by Representative Womack. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'll turn the introduction over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Chairwoman Pingree, and what a great honor it is to be with this subcommittee this morning and my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee. To all of you, I want to welcome to the from the natural state, Peter McKeith. If you hear someone mention the Hill in Washington, they refer to Capitol Hill, but in Arkansas, we refer to the University of Arkansas campus. So while Dean McKeith would need little introduction on the Hill in Fayetteville, I do want you, my colleagues on the Appropriations Committee, to know a little bit about his background. He's a professor and the Dean of the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design at the University of Arkansas, a cornerstone of higher education in my district. He was appointed as the 5th Dean of the school in 2014 and has made his mark in the industry as a nationally recognized scholar, teacher, and administrator. Since his arrival on campus, he's expanded academic and outreach programs and fostered innovative design thinking across the state and well beyond. A long list of accolades includes a Fulbright Fellowship, multiple Design Educator of the Year titles, and recognition of the Design Futures Council. I could go on, but I'm positive his expertise will be demonstrated in his testimony this morning. Before joining us in Northwest Arkansas, he was an Associate Dean, Professor of Architecture, an Adjunct Associate Curator for Architecture and Design at the Sam Fox School of Design and Visual Arts in Washington University in St. Louis. Prior to his tenure at WashU, he served as Director of the Master Architecture International Program at the Helsinki University of Technology in Finland from 1995 to 1999. Superb academic achievement laid the groundwork for Mr. McKeith's success in the field. A participant in the prestigious Eccles Scholar Program, he received his Bachelor of Arts in Literature and International Relations from the University of Virginia in 1981 and his Master of Architecture from Yale in 1985. He's also currently serving as chair of the advisory committee for the Northwest Arkansas Design Excellence Program, in addition to overseeing the design and construction of the Anthony Timberlands Center for Design and Materials Innovation, a regional center for research and development of new wood products and new approaches in sustainable construction materials. Mr. McKeith is also an accomplished author and has served as the editor of Perspecta, the Yale Architecture Journal, in addition to the SOM Journal. As even a cursory examination of his record makes abundantly clear, he's an excellent asset to the University of Arkansas and the greater Fayetteville and Northwest Arkansas community. His substantial experience will elevate today's discussions, and I am pleased to welcome him to today's hearing. Before I yield back, let me take a shameless opportunity to note that the Razorbacks are headed to the Sweet 16 for the first time in 25 years. And I know Mr. McKeith is just as excited about that as I am. So, Mr. McKeith, thank you for joining us, and go Hogs.
There you go. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll hear about some other favorite teams as the day goes on, but very exciting news for Arkansas. And thank you so much for being here to introduce your witness from your state. Now I'll yield to Mr. Joyce for any opening remarks he would like to make.
Well, thank you, Chair Pinkley. And special thanks to my friend and colleague, Congressman Womack, for taking the time to help introduce our witnesses this morning. Excuse me. I'd also like to extend a warm welcome to Dr. Cindy West, Peter McKeith, Dr. Stephen Shaler, and Mark Brinkmeyer. And I want to thank you all for participating today. While I regret that we cannot be together in person, I look forward to hearing your perspectives on innovative wood products and their impact on rural economies and the health of our nation's forests. Our nation's forests, both public and private, offer substantial environmental and economic benefits. Forests improve our air and water quality, provide habitat for plants and wildlife, reduce carbon in the atmosphere, and help control floods and erosion. Forests also furnish recreational opportunities, timber, mineral, and energy resources, but most importantly, quality jobs, especially in rural areas for communities across the country. I've seen these benefits firsthand in my home state of Ohio. Nearly 8 million acres of forest land help support over 120,000 forest-related jobs that contribute more than $20 billion to Ohio's economy. When considering the economic impact of forest products nationwide, the industry directly employs over 900,000 workers and manufactures nearly $300 billion in dollars worth of products annually. I recognize, though, our forests, to meet the needs of current and future generations, we must commit to finding ways to utilize, manage, and protect our nation's forests while maintaining viable markets for wood products. Innovative wood products provide us with an opportunity to meet these challenges. By developing and exploring new uses for wood, especially low value or low quality wood, we can create new jobs and market demand and reinvigorate rural economies. Innovative wood products also provide landowners with more opportunities for active management of our nation's forests, which helps us ensure that the forests are more resilient to insect infestations and diseases, as well as reduce the risk of catastrophic wildfires. I look forward to hearing today about how the U.S. Forest Service is accelerating the development of innovative wood products through research efforts at Forest Products Laboratory. I'm also keen to learn about the agency's work to help create new expanded markets for wood products through partnerships and grants. Additionally, I hope to hear more about the benefits associated with the diverse range of innovative wood products, including cross-laminated timber and other mass timber products, in addition to wood products derived from nanotechnology. With that, I look forward to this discussion ahead of us. In Ohio, we have no more teams left in the NCAAs, but I always like a dog, so I'll take Oral Roberts since they knocked off the Buckeyes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
There you go. Thank you, Mr. Joyce. I guess I better quickly pick a team. Would any other members like to make opening remarks?
Chairwoman Pingree.
Yes, Mr. Simpson.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, but before I do, I haven't had the opportunity yet to thank you for putting on this hearing and congratulate you on being the chairwoman of the Interior Appropriations Committee. I look forward to working with you, and I notice you've got a bunch of books behind you, and so do I. We're going to have to exchange titles and see what we can do. And just as an aside, I like the Razorbacks, but they haven't met Gonzaga yet. So the Bulldogs are going to eat everybody up. So just so you know that, you're not disappointed when it comes. But let me introduce a friend and advisor of mine for many years, Mark Brinkmeyer. He's the owner and chairman of the board of the Idaho Forest Group, as was mentioned, one of America's largest producers across Idaho and Montana. The Idaho Forest Group owns 6 sawmills and a finger joint facility with capacity over 1 billion board feet per year. Mark is an accomplished business leader, a champion of education and innovation, and a longtime philanthropist. Based in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho Forest Group grows, harvests, manufactures, and distributes lumber and other wood byproducts to customers in the United States and abroad. The company emphasizes a talented workforce of more than 1,000 employees and 2,000 partner contractors. IFG's mission statement is to enhance the lives and livelihood of our employees, customers, and partners, and the communities which we operate by providing the Earth's best renewable building products. He's a champion in the forest products industry, and I look forward to hearing their testimony. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for participating today.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson, and thank you for your kind words. It's wonderful to have someone from Idaho today here with us, and will give us a chance to decide who has the better forest and the better potatoes, Maine or Idaho. So it's always a competition. Let's start off with our witnesses with Dr. Cindy West. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. West.
Thank you, Chair and Ranking Member and members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity to share with you information about how the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forest Service supports innovative wood products and their impact on our nation. You know, the investment by the federal government in wood innovation and research started in 1910, when the National Center for Forest Products Research was established in Madison, Wisconsin. Made a critical need for the nation to lengthen the life of wood rail ties to fuel economic development of this country. Today, the The Forest Service uses all of its authorities across the agency to support wood innovation. In addition to research, state and private forestry grant programs support early adoption and application of wood innovations across the spectrum. They provide technical assistance and market development. We develop and trial many of our new technologies on national forests. We demonstrate their benefit and their efficacy and use demonstrations to transfer and speed up adoption of these innovations. We work from the smallest components of wood today at the nanoscale to mass timber for multi-story structures at the largest scale. And although we started as a national center, a single research organization within this country, we now work through a collaborative of university, industry, and NGO partners to innovate and address the most pressing issue of our time: how to build a sustainable future. Now, the year I was born, the world's population was around 2.9 billion. Today, it's 7.8 billion. And at the end of the century, when my grandchildren will be 85 and 82, the world's population is projected by the UN to be at 11 billion. It's urgent that we develop the technology to sustainably provide for the needs of 11 billion people across the world, solutions that address ecological, economic, and social needs. Nature offers us a sustainable path to this future through best management practices for forests and also for use. Wood is our most abundant, renewable, and versatile raw material on planet Earth. Today, you may not really realize how many wood products you touched before getting to work this morning. May have included maple syrup, toothpaste, of course, your wooden house, your home, your furniture, clothing, car parts, paper, and an aspirin that was compounded originally from a tree. The United States is a world leader in sustainable forest management. We're blessed with a very abundant natural resources. However, climate change is increasing the risk of these resources and to our forests. The amount of biomass accumulated in areas of increasing drought is not sustainable, as we've seen over this last decade in the Intermountain West. Warming temperatures and invasive species such as emerald ash borer are transforming the composition and regeneration of northern forests. We cannot take for granted our forests will continue to provide wildlife, recreation, clean water, carbon sequestration in the same abundance as in the past. We need to take action now, and unless we want to see impacts from these types of stresses on our forests. Sustainable management of our forest will continue to provide our nation with a positive carbon sink, reduce the loss of wildfires to forests, and provide benefits that enhance our quality of life, water, habitat, outdoor recreation, and economic opportunities for rural communities. Increasing markets for renewable wood materials and products makes a positive economic incentive to retain private forests as forests and to mitigate the effects of climate change. Innovative wood products diversify and support a vibrant forest product sector, which is essential to forest health and sustainability. My written statement provides many details on how the Forest Service is contributing to a sustainable solution through research, innovation, and market development with a wide variety of partners. But let me just talk a little bit about how we are advancing from the lab to putting discovery and innovation to use in growing a wood product sector, economy, and opportunities for good forest management. Together with our partners, we are increasing wood use in the nation's industrial building sector by supporting the development and application of mass timber products, such as cross-laminated timber CLT, in the construction of tall multi-story buildings to meet building code requirements. In the United States, we're working with organizations like the International Code Council, Woodworks, the Softwood Lumber Board, the American Wood Council, and importantly, the Department of Defense to support the changes necessary in building codes to use this technology. We've conducted numerous and necessary seismic and fire performance tests, blast tests to gain code support and pipe for this construction. The Wood Innovations Program has supported education and technical assistance for architects and engineers to design and build these systems. In 2014, when the Forest Service initiated engagement in the CLT sector, the U.S. had 0 manufacturing facilities. Today, there are 10 operational mass timber manufacturing facilities and we anticipate additional plants coming online soon. We're building the collaborations with businesses and organizations to help develop markets for CLT and mass timber products through the agency's Competitive Wood Innovations Grants Program. And finally, we are working to develop and refine new mass timber material and systems with the goal of utilizing low value and small diameter trees. And thus, we can provide forest landowners and managers viable markets to support management activities to improve forest conditions. The Forest Service is fulfilling a federal role as an agent to coordinate national capacity across different entities to develop a sustainable future and competitive advantage for forest owners and wood product businesses and industries. Using the materials that nature provides ensures our forests will continue to provide for the nation and the world. We appreciate the committee's interest in our work related to innovative wood products and look forward to working together to ensure these programs are delivered in the most efficient and effective manner possible. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. West. Dr. Sheeler, it'd be great to hear from you next.
Good morning, Chair Pingree, Ranking Member Joyce, and members of the subcommittee. My name is Steve Shaler. I'm Director of the School of Forest Resources at the University of Maine, a land, sea, and space grant university located in the homeland of the Penobscot Nation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about increasingly innovative wood products and their growing markets. The intent of my remarks today will be to illustrate the importance of forest source products to rural communities, their role in promoting sustainability and opportunities for carbon sequestration in wood building materials and other wood products. Maine, home to the first sawmill in North America, is the most heavily forested state in the country at 90% of the land area. The health and sustainability of our rural communities is entirely dependent on that of the forest. These forests are economic heart of many of our rural communities, supporting forest products, outdoor recreation and tourism industries, while providing vital habitat for wildlife, improving water and air quality for all life. We live in a challenging time where the impacts of climate change on forest health is increasingly evident, whether it is through temperature, drought, fire, invasive pests, muddy roads from early thaws, and heavy rain events. The need to adapt how we manage the forest depends on the presence of markets, and conversely, the ability to meet increased demand for wood products from forest systems requires the forest be healthy and sustainably managed. There's been incredible disruption in the forest products industry over the last 2 decades, with the closure of many pulp and paper mills that have long been the region's largest economic engines and the biggest buyers of wood. But exciting opportunities are emerging that will diversify, strengthen, and sustain the forest economy and the communities dependent upon it. Accelerating innovation in forest products and their applications is key to meeting increasing global demand for low carbon materials, chemicals, and fuels that come from forests, but that innovation must occur within the context of a vibrant, interconnected network of the environment, society, and economy. An example of a collaboration building upon strengths through innovation to shape the future of the forest economy and forest-dependent communities can be found in Maine, in the Forest Opportunity Roadmap Maine, also known as FORMAINE. FORMAINE is a unique cross-sector collaboration between industry, communities, government, education, and nonprofits. We've come together to ensure that Maine strategically adapts, capitalizes on changing markets to maintain our leading role in global forest economy and to support prosperity in the state while sustaining our natural resources. FORMAINE evolved from a federal economic development assistance team initiated in 2016 and is currently funded through the U.S. Economic Development Administration. The University of Maine is proud to play a central role in this effort, serving on FORMAINE's executive committee, a number of its subcommittees, including those focused on emerging technologies, market attraction, workforce development, and wood supply analysis. Our research and development are critical to Maine and the nation's ability to add value to existing industries and create new ones. We are increasingly seeing demand driven by industry interest for sustainable and renewable feedstocks, which actively managed forests can provide. Since 2016, over $1.1 billion in CapEx has been invested in Maine forest industries, including pulp and paper, lumber, wood energy, and wood composites. 2019, the University of Maine was awarded one of 10 university mass timber grants funded by the U.S. Endowment and the Forest Service to support demonstration project showcasing mass timber technologies on university campuses. The project helped to support the conceptual design, engineering, and pricing of a cross-laminated timber laboratory facility. To capture the full carbon picture of the project, a preliminary cradle-to-grave whole building life cycle assessment was performed, and the study highlighted that the material sourcing is a key driver of embodied carbon, and that storage of biogenic carbon in wood building materials is a clear positive attribute for the life of the structure. Opportunities for wood product innovation in the building space beyond load-bearing solutions also exists. Use of low-grade biomass or mill residuals for low-density wood fiber insulation materials is one example. Wood fiber insulation is currently being imported into the U.S., but high shipping costs have kept it an expensive niche product. Active collaboration with emerging domestic manufacturers in Maine are projecting wood fiber insulation to be cost-neutral, drop-in replacement for petroleum-based insulation products. A final example is a $1.5 million investment by the U.S. Forest Service to build a pilot plant for production of cellulose nanofibrils as part of a joint venture in 2011. Since inception, the University of Maine has shipped cellulose nanomaterials, including those produced at the Forest Products Laboratory, to 50 countries, 305 companies, and 276 universities to support R&D and product development. Though global in reach, 60% of samples have gone to U.S.-based organizations. This supports a large community of researchers and startups using cellulose nanofibers in a wide variety of applications, including adhesives, foams, packaging, building materials, and yes, even bones. Many of these will replace products made with petroleum products. To summarize, collaboration involving industry, government, universities, and local communities are central to leveraging the maximum impact of wood innovation, as is sustained federal investment that fosters that collaboration while supporting research and development. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak and for your ongoing interest and investment that is sustaining the forest economy, the communities, and citizens dependent upon it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comprehensive remarks. Mr. Brinkmeyer, we're excited to hear about the message from Idaho. You might need to unmute, or we can unmute you. We still can't hear you. Can our tech team unmute Mr. Brinkmeyer?
Madam Chair, it looked like he was unmuted on the WebEx, but he was not getting audio through, so we'll have to have somebody look into that.
Okay, why don't we work that out? Sorry, Mr. Brinkmeyer, we're anxious to hear from you, but I'll put Dean McKeith first, and then we'll come back, and hopefully it will all be settled by then.
Yes.
We hear you.
Good morning, Chair Pingree, Ranking Member Joyce, and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation and opportunity to speak with you regarding the importance of America's forests, of our nation's timber and wood products industries, and of the rural communities which reside within these forests. But in particular, to speak of the essential role that the vision, commitment, and innovation of our federal government should play in enhancing our nation's forests and our nation's environmental future. I serve the University of Arkansas, the state's land-grant university, as Dean of the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design. While I'll speak to the specifics of Arkansas's forests and its timber and wood industries today, I also speak on behalf of many schools and many universities across the United States engaged in similar endeavors. I offer here an Arkansas case study in the effectiveness, value, and essential importance of innovative research and development in the cause of America's forests. Two questions frame our work. What does it mean to be a nation of forests, of forested states? What is the value of funding innovation in our forests in the cause of the nation? By focusing on the potential of Arkansas forests, timberlands, and wood products industries, the Fay Jones School, together with our School of Forestry and Natural Resources, and with significant assistance from the U.S. Forest Service and its Wood Innovations Grant programs, as well as the Forest Products Laboratory, we've been able to stimulate both greater economic health, environmental health for this essential renewable resource, and greater economic development in the state, with attention to our rural communities and a more sustainable low-carbon future. In 2017, a U.S. Forest Service Wood Innovations Grant funded research into the viability of building new mass timber residence halls at the University of Arkansas. Design research residence hall prototypes constructed from mass timber. In validation of this effort, the university built a new $79 million residence hall out of mass timber, currently the largest such building in the United States. The Forest Products Laboratory has now provided funds further to our school for important research on this completed building. Our School of Forestry has also received Wood Innovation Grant funds, and with these, we are forming a statewide consortium of forestry, timberlands, and wood products stakeholders so as to maximize the environmental and economic benefits of Arkansas's forests. Collectively, the effects of this funding and the design research it yielded has been remarkable, as the University of Arkansas has become perhaps the most significant supporter of advanced timber construction in higher education, with more than $100 million in construction so far, and with the new $20 million Anthony Timberland Center for Design and Materials Innovation, a home to our numerous wood initiatives and a new applied research center now in the early stages of design. We are now a critical actor in the stimulation of the architecture, engineering, and contracting industries in the state, as well as turning our attention to our rural economies and communities. The impact of these initiatives now extends statewide, as our proof of concept at the university informs significant private enterprise in Arkansas. Structurlam, the leading mass timber manufacturer in North America from Canada, is now investing $90 million and hiring 130 Arkansas employees for its first U.S. facility, producing CLT panels in Conway, Arkansas. Structurlam's first primary project will be Walmart's new mass timber headquarters in Bentonville, a 3 million square foot campus, which will use 1.1 million cubic feet of Arkansas timber. And more projects, public and private, are on the way across the state. In total and in constant growth, this is the Arkansas Timber Project, stimulated by innovation funds from the USFS and collateral partners. I'll be emphatic now in summary. The United States of America is a forest nation. The forests are inextricably engaged with our history, our society, our politics, our culture, our environment, our future. The forests of the United States must therefore be wisely conserved, stewarded, and employed for the greatest good, for the greatest number, for the greatest benefit. These last words echo, of course, the credo of Gifford Pinchot, the founder of the USFS. This ambition can only be achieved through the concerted, far-sighted efforts of both public institutions and agencies and private stakeholder and corporate interests and organizations. The ideals, the purposes, activities, people, and funding mechanisms of the USFS are central to this larger goal. The specific work and collaborative funding of the Forest Products Laboratory and the specific funding of the USFS Wood Innovations Grant Program are demonstrably essential, value, and impactful across a broad range of actors and audiences in this mission across the country. If what we have achieved in Arkansas is any measure of effectiveness and value, then on behalf of my colleagues, partners, and allies in Arkansas and across the country, all engaged in the larger America's Forest Project, I confirm today the absolute value of a federally supported emphasis with enhanced and accelerated funding on America's forests, on America's timber and wood industries, and on America's timber and wood innovation initiatives to the greater good of our society and our nation. Thank you. I'll be happy to take questions when that moment comes.
Thank you very much, Dean McKeith. Always wonderful to hear someone quote Pinchot and know about the long history of our Forest Service. My understanding is there's still some technical issues with Mr. Brinkmeyer. Kind of looks like it. But we could We could go ahead and start questions, and I'll hear from the technical people as soon as they have that resolved. I know it was working earlier, so it's just the internet has a mind of its own. So if we go to questions, we'll just come back to his testimony. And I am going to yield for my first question to Ms. McCollum, because she needs to be at her defense hearing shortly. And so I'm happy to yield her my time, and I will ask some questions later.
Well, thank you, Chair Pingree, for allowing me. And I want to say, as long as we're speaking of defense, I want to acknowledge the partnership between the Army's Development Command Research Laboratory and the Forest Products Laboratory, and the extraordinary story of how leaders of their joint project sent legacy mahogany wood that was over a century old here to the Capitol to repair the damage endured on the January 6th attack. So once again, Chair Pingree, we find ways in which we can cross-pollinate through our work. I want to particularly to say that this priceless lumber is going to rebuild the heart of our democracy. And I hope when we can all go back in the Capitol and look at it again, that we get an opportunity to see the wood replacement. But I wanted to take a second to just talk about FPLS's ability to help our nation rebuild every day in every way throughout our communities. As we look forward to making serious investments in infrastructure across America, I'd like to hear more about the role that FPL sees in its forest products playing in sustainable source construction and new facilities, even in structures like bridges. So I'm going to give Minnesota a shout out. Mr. Joyce and I are often stuck in the middle between Ms. Pingree and Mr. Simpson, talking about their potatoes and their timber, but Mr. Joyce and I, just saying, we do have the greatest lakes. So the University of Minnesota has been working with the Resources Research Institute in their division at the university, and they've published some amazing and interesting research on the efficiency and durability of bridges that use timber alone or in a combination with other materials. And here's why timber bridges can be very exciting. They can be constructed in all weather conditions, and the wood is not damaged by continuous freeze and thaw conditions, and it can hold up to de-aucing rolled salt. So there's combinations where the bridges are use timber in the construction. So could you maybe elaborate a little more, if you could, on how we could see these forest products in recent years help prepare for that role of more sustainability, and in some ways be very green with reducing carbon footprint?
Oh, thank you very much, Congresswoman McCollum. I appreciate that question. I have worked for the last 7 years in looking at green products and their benefits, particularly in carbon sequestration and sustainability. And wood is, again, the only renewable material that is part of a biogenic cycle for carbon. By utilizing wood, we are taking wood out of forests. We're allowing new trees to grow and accumulate carbon, while taking that material that we removed that will continue to accumulate carbon. And let me just give you an example. I live in a 125-year-old house. I have flooring that needed to be replaced. So I went down to my local mill, and they had beams from a barn that was probably 150 years old. They sawed those beams into new flooring to match my old house. These trees probably for the barn building were at least 150 years old. So you begin to add up 150 years plus another, and 150 years of carbon sequestered in the forest, in the tree, 150 years in use of the barn. Now going into my old house, which will add another at least 125 to 150 years of carbon sequestration. And you begin to add up and look at across 400 to 500 years of carbon sequestered from when that tree or that seedling grew in a forest to where it's in service in life in my home. Now, wood in service accumulates in or it's embodied carbon. We can use lots of materials. We can substitute many materials that are non-renewable and combine them with other materials. So for example, just recently, we've taken the smallest particles from wood, nanomaterials, combined that with cement to create concrete that has higher strength properties, which means that we could reduce the amount of concrete that we use by adding nanomaterials from wood by 20%. And you begin to add up the road miles as the U.S. endowment calculated. One road mile, 4-lane highway would help us to thin and improve forest about 26 acres of forest per road mile of using this material for road surfacing. And I could go on and on. Bridges, I started my career a number of years ago, and I remember the startup of the Timber Bridge program to be able to utilize eastern species, particularly hardwood species, that had low value markets to create a higher value product using a technology that was easy to implement, low capitalization that local communities could develop. And so the bridge program is mature, but we are looking forward. We've had a lot of requests for looking at different applications. I can look forward to the future of saying we'll have a next generation of bridges that combine wood and other products, so higher performance, low cost, and to create local jobs and businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair McCollum, Dean McKeith wanted to give a quick answer, and I know you're over time, but I know you won't be here for a second question. So, Dean, if you could just give a quick answer before we lose Ms. McCollum.
Yep. Two issues, one related to defense. Currently, in concert with the U.S. Forest Service, the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, there's a 3-university project underway led by Clemson University's wood utilization laboratories and Pat Layton, but together with Arkansas and Oregon State, looking at prototyping new designs from cross-laminated timber for defense facilities across the country. It's a very important growth of innovative research and collaborative research altogether. Secondly, the Forest Products Laboratory is doing important work in moisture sensing, believe it or not, of newly constructed cross-laminated timber buildings. We're doing one here on campus with them. And then even more importantly, I would say, is life cycle analysis of the full life of a building from pre-construction all the way through 2, 5, 10 years on the road to really prove as much as possible on an evidence-based approach that these buildings constructed this way are of ultimate value to the consumer as well as to really the manufacturer.
Well, thank you. It looks like Mr. Kilmer and I have some extra homework on the Defense Committee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now, I think we have it all worked out for Mr. Brinkmeyer. Please accept our apology for the technical problem. So hopefully we'll be able to hear you now. Mr.
How's this?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Wow. Sorry, Madam Chairwoman. I am, first of all, I'm pleased to be here and want to thank our Representative Simpson. He casts a big shadow in Idaho, and he already put in Gonzaga, so we've dispensed with that requirement. There's been a lot said, and just quickly, we've, in our company and myself personally, have had a significant appetite to learn, and our training ground has been Europe. We've been heavily involved in the European community for the last 20-some years. Our company is 40 years old, and as comment was made in the opening remarks, our company has grown with technology, and cross-laminated timber was invented by Wolfgang Beira at the University of Graz, which is really the bastion of research on wood that we have found. The universities in the States are certainly picking up and making progress. but cross-laminated timber factories, laminated beam timber factories in Europe are significantly advanced, and it's technology that will benefit the U.S. as the U.S. begins to adapt. I'm here representing the Forest Products Commission in Idaho, which was started in 1992, and it was an earlier version of the Softwood Lumber Board, which I had the opportunity to be involved in from the very beginning. I'm especially pleased with Secretary Vilsack being back, because the Softwood Lumber Board was created under his watch. It's a checkoff, and like the Forest Products Commission, it's embedded in our state. All of forest products companies pay into the fund, and it's for education, conservation, forest health, and so forth. The Softwood Lumber Board is the lumber producers in the United States, including all lumber producers that import. We're in our 8th year. We've just increased our dues, and we will, over the next 7 years, put $125 million into mass timber. Now, we call it mass timber, but really it's a moniker for non-residential housing. Residential housing in the United States is approximately 94% is wood related. Commercial, on the other hand, is not. And our competitors in that regard are steel and concrete. Wood has certainly a better carbon footprint than steel concrete, but really all building materials have their rightful place in the construction environment. And our goal is for wood to have its rightful place. And we're accomplishing this through Woodworks, which the Softwood Lumber Board supports significantly. I believe that we're their largest supporter economically. And the other is the American Wood Council, which is a group of unsung heroes who do marvelous work and are involved with the Forest Lab to some degree. But it's through the efforts of the Softwood Lumber Board and the American Wood Council that last year in the code cycle, they were successful in changing the codes to allow mass timber construction for buildings 18 stories. We had asked for 12 when we started that process. We were able to go to 18 because of the science, work from universities, work from the Forest Products Lab, research done by the industry through the American Wood Council. There were comments earlier about some of the bomb tests that were done, and for schools to be built on military bases, extensive fire testing, which is one our competitors use against us from time to time as being a risk. But mass timber has a huge opportunity to grow in the United States. And I think with what you've heard today in testimony, there's a lot of very capable people, very bright people focused on this. And I might add that Woodworks' sole job is to talk to people building in the commercial space and convert those buildings to mass timber. And so far, they've been successful and have converted over 4.5 billion feet lumber being utilized in projects. For us, and what we see in the future is
Uh-oh, I think we lost your audio again. Just when you were going to, you're back.
What? I'm back.
Yeah, you were starting to say what you see in the future.
What I see in the future is we will have continued focus with mass timber as we have more and more focus on climate change, which is real. It's not perceived, it's real. We experience it in the Intermountain West, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But one area that we need focus, and our company is focused on it now, is what we call all of the fiber that's non-rectangular. Because at the end of the day, lumber producers make precision rectangles. And we have approximately 30% of a log is residual fiber. And we just lost in July one of the most modern newsprint plants in North America at Usk, Washington. And without any notice, they closed the plant, paid out the Warren Act obligation to the employees, and handed the keys to the bankruptcy judge in Spokane, where it still exists today. No one will buy it. That's a message, one we should pay attention to. We feel that wood fiber, you talk about plastics, we know a lot about biofuel. We're working with the National Lab in Idaho now, and with the experts, a particular group we're working with and I'm fascinated with are the fellows that came together and manufactured the biojet fuel that Alaska Airlines used to fly from Seattle to Washington, D.C. here a few years ago. There is the area that is the most promising. Mass timber will take care of itself. It's a great product, and it will find its place. And the architects and the engineers, it's now up to them to bring it into fruition. But we see the fiber side of it as a huge opportunity. As we address forest health in the West, we have submergible material that is a fire loading on the lands that we need to deal with. And my hope is that this body, as you look at an infrastructure bill going forward, that you will consider infrastructure funds for forest health. And in that infrastructure bill, you look towards what to do with this low value fiber. It's non-structural fiber in its current state, but it can be used from a BTU point of view with respect to carbon. The UK has huge investments in pellet plants in the south because it's proven technology that current coal-fired power plants, if they're fired with 80 to 90% pellets, they can maintain that electrical generation infrastructure. And you can look to Enviva, you can look to Drax, you can look at those companies now that are building very large pellet facilities all around the U.S. that take advantage of this fiber situation and how it fits into the carbon equation. And these are things that we need to pay attention to.
I'm going to need to have you wrap up, but we can ask some more of these things in the questions later. Can I get you to say just a couple of things?
I want to make one last comment, and I'm sorry, Madam Chairwoman, for going over here.
It's perfect, fine.
We are working with Oxford University in Cambridge and have been for the last 4 years on satellite imagery. Our Intermountain Forest, where our mills are located, comprises approximately 16 million acres. It was discussed early on of the problems of the wildfires in the Intermountain Forest, and that exposure is huge. And for our particular company, the future of our company is the Intermountain Forest. And as a result, we took it upon ourselves that I personally wanted to understand and know, because of our species diversity, what that forest is going to look like today, tomorrow, and 20 years from now. And with Oxford University and a emerging technology group from what they call the satellite catapult, we have been doing research on the Intermountain Forest and have completed roughly 9,000 plots and using artificial intelligence to train the algorithms, where we can look at habitat, we can share information with our friends in the conservation community and others. And this is something I personally and our company have taken on. We've got great leadership in a gentleman by the name of Tom Schultz, who's taken this and has understand this. I just tweeted out it's time to quit, Madam Chairwoman. I'll take any questions when the time's right. Apologize for all this. You would think a technical company wouldn't have technical problems, but apparently we do.
Yeah, well, that's because the internet has a mind of its own, so certainly not your fault, but we really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your wonderful testimony and all the experience and work that you're doing. I will yield to Mr. Joyce for questions.
Thank you, Chair Pingree. Mark, the loss of your internet there for a while makes a good case on why we need to increase broadband throughout the country. And I disagree with you there on the big shadow of Mr. Simpson. He's half the congressman he used to be when I first got there. He's losing weight at a rapid pace every year. But Dee McKeith, good to see you back here. Last Congress, I was proud to sponsor with Congressman Bruce Westerman's bill, the Trillion Trees Act, to plant 1 trillion trees globally by 2050 and promote sustainable forest practices to make our forests more resilient to diseases and wildfires, while also reducing carbon in the atmosphere. To increase carbon storage, the Trillion Trees Act sought to incentivize innovative building practices with a sustainable building tax credit. Dean, consistent with the policies in Trillion Trees Act, can you take a moment to discuss the potential benefits of building with innovative wood products, and especially how these products like cross-laminated timber store carbon and reduce CO2 emissions during construction?
Thank you very much, Representative Joyce. I have appreciated very much coming to know Congressman Westerman and his constituents of the state in the state of Arkansas, as well as his advice. Certainly, as you know, he is the only forester in the House of Congress, so there's a great deal to be learned. The benefits, and I was speaking as the Dean of a School of Architecture and Design, I want to, in fact, resound what Mr. Brinkhammer has said. All materials have a use value that can be understood. At a very basic level, I'm quite ecumenical on the subject of steel and concrete as much as timber. Each of these materials has a role to play. And yet the use value, the life cycle value, certainly can be estimated and even calculated at a higher value when considering the use of wood products and mass timber more generally. This is partially what the Forest Products Laboratory is doing now in concert with universities and schools across the country. I think there is an important aspect to be understood, certainly here from the state of Arkansas, and I think across the southeast of the United States more generally, which is a southern yellow pine fiber basket, along with significant hardwood stands. And that is to say that currently in Arkansas and elsewhere across the southeast, we are, in a sense, growing more than we can reasonably harvest and utilize. We have a growing issue of surplus, which is either still standing in the forests or on the ground. This is, you could say, a negative value, so to speak, in the sense that it sets us up for potential forest fires, for insect infestation, as is being experienced elsewhere, and a range of other environmental effects, including into the groundwater supply. So there is a benefit which needs to be noted from the outset, which is a dramatic surge in the use, in the development of new products and markets for those products, as well as just expanded markets for the products we have, will bring environmental benefit by it's beginning to address, in part, this surplus condition. Surplus has to be seen as opportunity. So above and beyond what we see in terms of the built constructions, there is, I think, an underlying environmental benefit, which I believe all of us can understand. And it goes to the heart, I think, of the discussion today. The other questions having to do with the character of the construction itself. This is to say, making use of, as was already discussed, smaller dimension woods, which offcuts or tree thinnings, making maximum use of every tree in a sense that's taken down. This to me is, I think, an ultimate principle of economy and environment at the same time. And It means that our buildings can be built less wastefully. It means that they can be, in many ways, built more quickly and more efficiently. And ultimately, although there is still significant ways to go in terms of the research, residing within a timber building is beginning to be shown to have advantageous psychological effects. We work better, we work more productively, we work more optimistically from working within a wood-based environment. So there's a range of issues I could go on. I see my time is up, but I'm happy to continue to expand at request.
Thank you. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Joyce. Mr. Kilmer has another committee, so I happily defer to him for the next question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on that last comment, I'm thinking about asking for a bill to turn the U.S. Capitol into a wood building. My first question is for Dean McKee. You know, we know that building with wood has the potential to reduce embodied carbon in buildings. The data suggests massive emissions reductions over the next 50 years, about 870 million tons of CO2, you know, which is about powering about 100 million homes for a year. That's equal to the emissions gains in that regard. That's a huge deal. And, you know, now that we've seen the 2021 edition of the International Building Code include an update to allow wood buildings up to 18 stories tall, which captures most residential and commercial buildings in the US, it feels like the time is right to see a significant increase in tall wood building construction, but we haven't seen that shift really materialize quite yet. And I'm just curious what you think the holdup is. Is it just a natural adjustment period, or are there remaining barriers that you see that are preventing the private sector from transitioning to more tall wood construction? Do we have the manufacturing capacity to meet the demand? What's cooking?
Thank you. And again, this is a multi-front question, or a multi-front discussion. And you've identified some of the significant factors here. Manufacturing, yes. 7 years ago, when we began to look at what was possible in the state of Arkansas, I showed Governor Hutchinson a map of the United States indicating where the fiber basket was in the southeast, where Arkansas was, and where the cross-laminated timber facilities were in North America, let alone the United States. And of course, they were in Canada. There were 2 or 3 coming into being in your state and elsewhere, in Oregon and Idaho and so forth. And there was 1 potentially on the books in Alabama. But there was nothing in the center of the United States, where arguably the Mississippi River has a great presence still in transportation. So there is a supply question, a manufacturing and supply question, no doubt, that brings this into a greater reality for anyone thinking of a new building. That's certainly one aspect. The other aspect, I think, has to do, as you've noted, with the building codes, their relationships to insurance costs, their relationship to pro forma costs as developers and other commissioning agents see those costs. The IBC has, yes, advanced significantly, but of course, building codes are still maintained at the local or at the state levels. And therefore, it does take a while for the new building code to be brought into I guess, code compliance or code agreement, even at the level of a city or a state or a county. So there's work to be done there too. I do want to, so yes, code, insurance, and also financing, right? Which has to do with how buildings are financed, how they are underwritten. And there are an increasing number of banks and other financial concerns which see the value of this to their bottom line. I attended a significant conference 2 years ago organized by Bank of America, which you may know is seeking to invest significant amounts into a low carbon future. This is very much on their agenda. The last thing I want to note, again, looking at just keeping an eye on the clock, is for me, and I'm not alone in this, but others could differ, the real challenge here is not the tallest building in the world. That is, I think, always something of an architect's dream, perhaps, but it is not really the sweet spot for mass timber and wood product construction. The sweet spot is the 8 to 10 story building, whether it's speculative or commercial, cultural or academic, and equally it's into the residential market, especially multifamily, multi-story. And this is where we come to building our small towns and communities, building our rural communities at that, by really addressing the ability for mass timber to move into the residential market.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Madam Chair, for fitting me in. I may come back after testifying to budget. So thanks so much. This is a great topic, and appreciate the subcommittee taking this up. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer. Mr. Simpson's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman. I got to leave after this question also for another meeting and stuff, and hopefully I'll be able to come back after it. But Mark, I wanted to ask you, one of the important things is we can talk about all the interesting things that happen in the forest products industry and what they're developing and so forth. One of the most important things is getting that wood from the forest to the mill so that they can actually do those types of activities that are necessary. In a 2015 ruling in the cottonwood, it has created a barrier that stands in the way of improving health of our federal forests. How has the cottonwood decision created uncertainty in your supply chain, and what can we do about it?
Great question, Congressman. Thank you. Cottonwood is one of those red herring lawsuits that once we go through the whole collaborative process on a timber sale or work in the woods, whatever it be, it's still subject to exposure if there's new science that may be unrelated that shows up in another issue in another place. And it can be used to hold up that particular timber sale. And so what the whole purpose with cottonwood and Senator Daines and another senator from California have legislation that we hope will be passed to clean up the cottonwood. As you know, there was great work done on the Farm Bill here years ago, and we've not had the benefit because of cottonwood really to continue the efforts in the woods. Our position and the work we've done with the Western Governors Association, which is something that deserves a shout out, and you're aware of it through our governor, Butch Otter, who was a huge proponent of that. It's the bipartisan effort of the Western states coming together on Western health issues. And it's through that focus we'll get to the cottonwood issue. I am not for closing the doors to the courthouse, but we have to have some action against serial litigators. And that cottonwood is used by the serial litigators to stop timber sales. You're aware we have Good Neighbor Authority in Idaho, Good Neighbor authorities coming in Montana, where the state foresters have the ability to work with the federal forest professionals in administering timber sales. All the right pieces are in place for our forest health and continued effort on the forest floor. But those are important. One other area that I didn't mention in my earlier comments is the true tools for forest health are our loggers. And our loggers need certainty for timber under contract and so forth so they can invest in their equipment and keep their businesses going. We have over 2,000 logging families that work for our company in the Intermountain. And to me, it's really important that we look out for them and advance their technology, logistics, and other attributes that we can bring in helping them, because it's been overlooked for some time. I'm not sure what's gone on in other states in that regard, but it's certainly in the Intermountain. It's the federal forests that have the issue with cottonwood.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that answer, and we look forward to working with you on this. Just for the sake of the other members, I will tell you that we've mentioned here Mr. Westerman's bill on the trillion tree planting or whatever. There's also a bipartisan bill that I'm the lead co-sponsor of, called the Replant Act, that's been reintroduced in the House, which would help the Forest Service plant 1.2 billion trees over the next 10 years and create 40,000 new jobs. And it's okay to co-sponsor both of those bills. I think both of them would be beneficial to get through Congress. So I look forward to working with all of you on that. And thanks for this hearing, Representative Pingree.
It's been great having on the call. But I wanted to ask you, since the university has had the opportunity to kind of look at this broad range of products from, the cellulosic fibers to CLT, and now the new innovation around wood-related building insulation, where do you see the most promise? And I know that's kind of a big picture question, but just there's so many things on the forefront. Just be interested to hear from your perspective on that.
Thank you for the question. And the most promise is a big question. I think one of the real values and important themes about innovation is there isn't one solution, and it's this broadening of markets, mass timber that we've had the discussions about, putting in the insulation, new materials from nanocellulose, the small fiber. Broad markets have natural ups and downs. So having that diversity for the manufacturing sector is really important. Maine is characteristic of the industry in the state, if I may be so bold, is that it has a variety of markets. I think in Arkansas, they say you use everything of the hog but the squeal. Well, in Maine, what you're doing is you tend to use, if you've got the ability to use the pulp, if you've got the ability to use the lumber, if you have the energy, if you have the new products from the nanocellulose, you have the ability to use every part of the tree, the bark, for energy for its highest value as markets change. You're not stuck into a single paradigm. And in this realm of changing, as the world changes, we need to have that flexibility and that innovation moving forward. So we need it all, but it's that connection. And we've had a discussion about the life cycle analysis. We also think in terms of circular economy, where we're looking at the end of that 120 years or 60 years or 3 years in packaging or 6 months in packaging, how designing and innovating so it continues to be reused and has the lowest carbon and sustainable impact. So I didn't exactly answer your question, maybe directly, but everything's important, and how they work together is really vital. And that ties in with the housing is the mass timber is what happens when we deconstruct that building. Will we be able to put it into flooring? How do we design that building? What connector system innovation? All of those come in to take the long view. We're solving some of today's problems right now, but this is really the long view solution.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it kind of leads into another question that I was going to ask Dr. West, and Mr. Brinkmeyer brought it up as well. But when we talk about harvesting the forest, one of the opportunities, because you mentioned it, is the sort of full use of everything in the forest. That can be kind of helpful on two fronts in terms of the managing the forest and cleaning up some of the left behind that could put us in a better position when it comes to forest fires in the future. And it's something we have to invest in quite a bit. But some people raise concerns about what does get left behind and how we sustainably do that. So before I go to Dr. West, do you want to make any comment about how that's been perceived in Maine in terms of like sort of, snout to tail use of the forest in a sense?
Thank you for the question. There's a boy. I don't know how to answer that, to be honest.
Okay, that's fine. Well, why don't I just skip to Dr. West and then see what time I have left. But well, you know full well, Dr. West, because hazardous fuel reduction is a big part of our budget. It's, I think Mr. Brinkmeyer mentioned putting it into an infrastructure package, and we've looked at that. The idea of the massive amount of cleanup that needs to take place, either in forest where there's been a burn, or just in the cleanup and maintenance of it. So how do you sort of see that fitting into the picture? And is there a way to do some of these good forest products, turn things into a usable product, but also maybe save us some money on the forest cleanup budgets?
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit. We talk about hazardous fuels, and that's been a term that's been used for a couple decades. I'm going to suggest that right now, in many of our places across the nation, that the environmental conditions that our forests are growing under now in this century are fundamentally different from the environmental conditions that they were growing under when we developed all those guidelines for foresters to manage, right? So how many trees per acre, what size, what species, to maximize productivity. And what we know from what we've experienced through drought, massive drought, more than 1 million acres of beetle kill, earlier this century in the Intermountain West, to 4 years of drought, setting up massive dieback and beetle kills and fire in California. In the Intermountain West now, we're seeing across several states where for the first time since we have been collecting data that we are eluting carbon. So we're not netting more carbon in our forests, but they are becoming emitters. So I would say that, part of it is hazardous fuels in that we've got too much material in there to burn, but also in order to keep our forests healthy so that they can withstand insect and disease that will cause death, dry fuels in the forest. It's a bigger picture and a bigger cycle. We need to go in and remove material from those forests. There's not enough water on those landscapes to support all that biomass, in addition to fire. And when we take this material, we have lost, several folks have spoken to us, we've lost our low value residual wood markets, right? And that was our pulp industries. And so with the loss of that, we're looking at where can we utilize this material? What technologies can we develop? We have technologies. We know how we can take and use this material, but what we need to put in place and think about are policies that help us to make those technologies economical, whether we're converting wood to various types of fuels, biochar, whether we're removing these and putting them into a composite or an engineered wood product. We know how to do this. We just need the policies to help us work across both federal and state agencies with the private sector to make these things economical. So we got technology, and we can advance the science, but that's where I think we have our biggest gap right now. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I recognize Mr. Stewart for 5 minutes. Thank you. And your clock is wrong. I think it's 2 hours later right here, so I don't know. You've got that 9:30 on your clock. So. And you're muted. Uh-oh.
Thank you. I say it's a beautiful day out here in Utah. And you're right, a couple hours behind. Ms. Pingree, thank you for hosting us and of course to the witnesses today. Ms. Pingree, you started out talking about some of the differences in the forest between the West generally that of course I represent in the East, and I've had a chance to enjoy the beautiful forest in the East. And Dr. West, you alluded to the thing I want to talk about today, and that is there are some differences, private forests versus public forests, public lands. One of the things we know about out here in the West, as you said, Dr. West, is that in some cases our forests, in fact, in many cases, far too many, our forests are overgrown. We do need a healthy restoration, and the threat of catastrophic wildfire is one of the things we have to live with because of that overgrowth. One of the problems we have here in Utah, and I think it's not only within my state, I think it's broadly in the West, we don't grow these enormous trees. Many of them are small diameter trees. And the market for these small diameter trees, when I say small diameter, I'm talking, 8, 12, 14 inches. They're not, tiny. They're certainly viable on the market, except for only for special uses. And we're experiencing a couple interesting things right now. One of them is an incredible inflation in timber. If you're in the housing, or if you're trying to buy a home or build a home right now, that's certainly reflected as we've seen timber prices double over really a matter of less than a year. And yet we can't use these small diameter trees that are so common out here in the West. And if we could, it would help reduce the threat of these catastrophic fires. There's a couple alternative sources, like biochar or wood shavings. And I'm asking, I guess, the Forest Service, how can we help match the demand for timber products with the challenges of these small timber, and at the same time, reduce the threat of the forest fires and become part of the healthy restoration as well. And Dr. West, if you could maybe lead.
I think, Mr. Stewart, your camera is off. I think it probably was a mistake too. Or who is it? Chris Stewart, your camera is off.
Yeah, for some reason, when I go to unmute myself, it turns my camera off. You tell me. It's been that way for a couple of weeks, and we're trying to fix it. But that's what
It's
happened.
fine. We know you're there, so please continue.
Yeah.
And Dr.
Yeah.
West, you were.
Thank you for that question. I have family that live on the Wasatch Front, and I've talked with water utilities and concerns out of Salt Lake City, where 60% of the water comes down through the Cottonwood canyons, and the extreme conditions in those canyons and impacts on water and quality and quantity. So what we need is a solution to take small trees and make them into use or higher value wood products. We have limited uses and capacity in your state and actually throughout the Intermountain West to be able to utilize this material with current technologies that typically would make an engineered product or a composite product that requires high capitalization costs with a lot of uncertainty for timber supply for those types of investments as the economics roll out. So what we need is something that is to scale, that can be capitalized at a lower cost, and will take these small stems and convert them to a higher value product. And that is one of the areas of research that we have targeted and some promising technologies that we've identified to be able to take the stem and convert it with lower capitalized technology that we can put in at the right scale in these communities to address this problem. And so that is a future use.
And Dr. West, if I could on that very quickly, the market has just shifted, as I said, although I actually think that I didn't express it very well, in the sense that in the past, the market didn't demand these small diameter trees, but in talking with people in the market and people here in the West, that's no longer true. But there is a market for this. But what we don't have, as you said, is the infrastructure in the market. But we can't develop the infrastructure if there's not the promise that we would have large scale tracts that would be available. And that's what I'm encouraging Forest Service to do. It's a little bit of a chicken or the egg, what comes first. If the Forest Service would commit to make large tracts available for these small diameter trees, the market would move in and provide the infrastructure. I'm convinced of that. But we need the forest to be more accommodating to tract sales that they just haven't been willing to do in the past.
The Forest Service is aware of this challenge and working with states and others as we advance, our stewardship work and our shared stewardship program across the West to find solutions to the problem that you just described.
All right, and my time has expired, but again, thank you. We look forward to working with you and others as well.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Ms. Lee, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairwoman Pingree and Ranking Member Joyce for this hearing, as well as all of our guests and witnesses. It's been fascinating. I'm proud to represent the state of Nevada, where we have the fastest growing population of any state during the last 5 decades. As we've grown, the demand for affordable housing has rapidly outpaced our supply, and today we have a shortage of roughly 80,000 affordable units for low-income renters. So while we may not have large swaths of forest in southern Nevada, although my counterpart, Mark Amadei from up north, has a different scenario, we are certainly invested in wood innovation, and particularly the impacts it has on building materials and constructions. One innovative wood product that I'm particularly interested in is mass timber. We've heard today how mass timber can be made from the smaller and weaker trees that are removed from forests during thinning operations to prevent wildfires. Another big concern in the drought Southwest, as we're basically in a mega drought. We've also heard that when produced sustainably, mass timber building materials have the potential to be stronger, more fire resistant, and promote faster, cost efficient construction. So I want to direct my question to Mr. McKeith. You've described how sustainably sourced mass timber can be used as a low carbon alternative for building materials. And as we tackle our housing crisis here in Southern Nevada, I'm particularly interested in the potential cost benefits of using mass timber in building construction. Can you comment on that and talk about how you see that transpiring?
Thank you very much for the question, and very much thank you for saying the word housing. Housing is critical to our future as a nation, and certainly critical in any state, and it's whether it's here in Arkansas or in your state of Nevada. We believe that there's a role for mass timber and wood product development within the housing industry, within the housing market, within the housing territory altogether. As I alluded to earlier, this is where the financial metrics as well as the quality of life metrics can potentially be most broadly realized. This is also where I would say the universities and the research enterprises in the universities can be of real importance. And just to quote one example, I know this is being worked on at Clemson. I know it's being worked on at Oregon State. I can tell you it's being worked on here in Arkansas, where we have our own design to income issues for affordable housing. We know that stick frame construction, of course, is a major market for the existing wood industry as it is. But at the same time, there are the dimensions really pertain to what is in essence a private market driven territory, in which we can either reduce the cost of land, reduce the cost of design, or reduce the cost of construction. I can certainly be addressing the cost of design, and what we can do within our schools and universities is to produce prototypical affordable housing unit-based design based upon mass timber panelized construction that can reduce that line item on a pro forma to make this attractive to a developer, whether that's a government agency or a private market developer. That's what we can be doing to then leverage the manufacturing capacity that is currently in development in the United States. There's a lot of wins that we can achieve out there, but it is, as was said earlier, it's got to be done in a consortium-based approach. Government, industry, and the academy to further this along. Our approach is to say, we'll prototype design, and then we will provide those designs at minimal cost to developers or nonprofits alike in order to incentivize their use of mass timber in a repetitive way. That for us is the real next horizon.
Thank you. And my time is up, so I'll have to yield. Thank you very much.
sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Mr. Amadei, would you like to be recognized for 5 minutes for questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Couple of preliminary things. I noticed that the vice chair was talking about something to do with the Great Lakes as an individual who represents the greatest single lake, that being Tahoe. We're happy to welcome those lakes where they needed 5 or 6 of them to go ahead and make the great thing, but you know, no hard feelings. That old saying that I believe you folks in Maine are familiar with, quality is preferable over quantity. But anyhow, let's get on to the hearing, huh? Thank you. I was intrigued to hear the discussion a little bit earlier about low value fiber and forest health and fuels management. You've touched on it. Other people have. I believe Mr. Stewart referred to it as low diameter trees or something along those things. And as the home of, which represents my colleague Susie Lee's district in Mount Charleston and the Spring Mountains, at the home of the Humboldt-Toyabe National Forest, which I think is the largest one acres-wise in the nation. The challenges are such that I'm glad to hear the discussion about all the innovation and stuff like that, and certainly support all that. But I think we need to talk about, as the committee does its work, talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room in terms of, which is forest health, which is also fuels management. And so when we talk about that, and we also add in the carbon, I'm guessing that maybe some of the folks on the panel can answer this question, but when we lose wood in the forest, fuel in the forest, through the forest fire mechanism, the carbon release and the air quality implications are nothing short of catastrophic. We don't highlight that a lot, but nonetheless, when we talk about, I was intrigued to hear the discussion about turning biomass into pellets to make that, dealing with carbon release, whether it's biomass or fuel generation or other stuff, is eminently manageable compared to rapid oxidation. And I can tell you, no offense to my colleagues in the Golden State, but when there's a big fire in the forest in California, Nevada's air quality goes right out of sight in terms of you can't see anything, there's health district warnings, there's all that stuff, which has become all too common. So I would like to hear if any of the folks on this panel have information regarding what the air quality carbon release realities are. And I know that it differs based on what the fuel is for the acre that's burning, but none of it's good. If there's any existing data on that, and then also if there are 1 or 2 clearinghouses, if you will, that talk about the low value fiber products and how that can be basically looked at in a responsible infrastructure policy going forward.
Looks like Mr. Brinkmeyer, did you want to take that?
Yes, please. Is my audio working?
Perfectly.
Yes.
It is. All right. Well, great question, and I've got a couple comments here. I think I mentioned earlier that we're building a new mill in Mississippi, and Mississippi's the reason we're going to Mississippi is assurance of supply. And with respect to the gentleman that asked the question about the small trees in Utah, if there's certainty available with respect to raw material supply, the industry will come. And we have the technology to deal with small logs. That technology going to the state of Maine, knowing Mr. Irving and other producers, your logs are quite small. Your trees are quite old. They're slow growing. They have structural integrity used in I-joists and other products. Nature's own engineered wood, if you will. And so the technology exists to economically handle the small material. With respect to forest health, The answer is pellets. And the infrastructure bill, there are pellet manufacturers now. There's technology that's emerging. It's been in Europe for some time. And to give an example, residual, let's just pick sawdust, in Europe sells for 80 euros a ton. In the United States, we get $5 to $7 per ton. The whole point being, this is about because of natural gas in the United States versus in Europe that they don't, and it's used for energy. So the BTU value in Europe is much higher than the United States, hence the pellet plants being built in the Southeast for export to Japan and other places in Europe. So the answer to the small diameter wood and the recipes that have come out of the pellet industry is that it will take bark. So it's chippers to the logging community to be able to remove this small material and economically put it into pellets and use it for fuel, as was mentioned earlier. So my point is we have solutions. The industry will rise to the occasion to be able to deal with it. But we are just a tool. And we are an industry that's not subsidized. We're not looking for subsidy. What we need is certainty. And the mills, there's other families in the industry that would build mills and have the technology and the ability to do it. But that would be the issue. So these are all solvable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Amadeo yields back, and Mr. Cartwright is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Pingree, and thank you to all our witnesses for being with us today. Thank you particularly to Dr. McKeith, Dean McKeith, for mentioning Gifford Pinchot, who hails from my district, from Milford, Pennsylvania. Started the forestry school at Yale, the first U.S. Forestry Service chair, and great friend of Theodore Roosevelt, the both of them terrific conservationists. And Gifford Pinchot went on to become the governor of Pennsylvania in 1931, largely through the efforts of his wife. Many people don't realize Cornelia Pinchot was basically the leader of the suffragist movement in Pennsylvania, enabling an entire gender of voters to come online. And it was his popularity because of his wife that really ushered Gifford Pinchot into the office of governor of Pennsylvania in 1931. And he had this summer camp for the Yale Forestry School at his home in Milford, Pennsylvania as well. Well, and there's no coincidence there. As you all may be aware, Pennsylvania is home to many beautiful forests. The name Pennsylvania means Penn's Woods. Over 58% of Pennsylvania is covered in forests right now. Many of the forests are publicly owned, but there are 750,000 people who are private owners of forest land in Pennsylvania, with less than 3% of the land owned by the forest product industry. First question I have is about invasive insects and diseases. Now, the introduction and spread of non-native invasive insect, pathogen, and plant species are causing significant harm to both urban and rural forests. I recently introduced the Native Plant Species Pilot Program Act to try to understand the cost effectiveness of using native plant materials in land management activities. Dr. West, the first question goes to you. What efforts is the Forest Service taking to combat invasive species and reestablish native species?
Thank you for the question. As I mentioned earlier in my remarks, invasive species are a significant threat, particularly to our eastern forests. We've seen many of those species, both insects, invasives, diseases that have affected the composition of our native forest. So, there's not a one track solutions. We are looking and working with universities, with other federal agencies, with state agencies, first of all, to early detections of any new invasives coming in. And then once detection, trying to eradicate quickly. When we've lost the game there, now we have to manage and control. So working on that front, we are also looking at developing biological control methods. We're looking at managing that with different chemical treatments, as well as looking at what comes after. So even though we've lost the game, we have to look at how do we restore behind. I think the chief may have mentioned in her testimony in another hearing about we need to, begin to think how we re-ash our forests. The chestnut blight took out chestnuts. We are looking at challenges for oak regeneration. And in the face of this, we're facing changing climatic conditions around climate change. But the good news is nature is resilient. And with our help and the work that we're doing to find solutions, including genetic selection of solutions for trees that can become resistant to diseases, we can help to shape the forest of the future. And I think that's where we need to be looking to is the future. And we've got a lot of great biologists, ecologists working across with state universities. We're working on federal lands, state lands through our state agencies to better understand the trajectory of our forests and what we need to do as managers and as well as developing the technologies and the treatments for the future of our forests. And I can provide you with a great more details on that if you'd like, Congressman.
I think we're going to follow up. I've gone over my time, and Madam Chair, I yield back.
Mr. Cartwright, we'll, it looks like we might have a brief second round of questions. So thank you to our witnesses if you're willing to have a few more questions. I'll start with myself. Mr. Brinkmeyer, thank you so much. It's really been helpful to have your perspective, from the business side. Everyone's been great, so thank you for all of the testimony. But you mentioned a couple of things in your first testimony that I'm just interested to ask you more about. I think you said that you have long turned to Europe to look at some of their best practices and seen that as a source of kind of looking into the future of wood products. And also you mentioned the checkoff system. So I guess my two questions are, do you think we still, do we adequately utilize the forest practice and products that are being developed in Europe right now? Is there more we could do with that sort of shared information? And are we using the checkoff system enough? I know that's in the Ag Committee, but not here. But just in terms of this whole question about developing markets, getting more built with some of these wood products, particularly the new and innovative ones. What's your perspective on that?
Well, thank you very much for the question. With respect to Europe, the European sawmill community and the forest products community is virtually all family held. And I've had the opportunity to be part of the International Association and have gotten to know the families over the years, and they're embracing of technologies. So there aren't public companies and large public infrastructures. So they're quite conservative. Their sustained yield program in Austria and Germany is over 200 years old, and how they manage their forest. And so there's a message there. And they, for example, have processes because of their energy costs, where the actual slash is baled and bundled and brought in and converted to energy. So there are messages in those states. Same thing with respect to Finland, Sweden, and so forth. So we personally and professionally in our company, we look to Europe first. And we have, for example, in processing logs, just to give you an example, it's all done with laser data points. On a 20-foot log, we have 20,000 data points. And what we're doing is we're extracting precision rectangles out of a truncated cone. 3 or 4 years ago, we invested in a CT scanner. And the reason we did that, all we can do is saw from the outside in. Today, we can saw from the inside out. We know where the knots are, we know where the defect is, and so all of this can lead to a higher grade of lumber. This is all European technology. It didn't come from the United States. And so our new mill in Mississippi will employ not only that technology, but other technology as we study that log for better yield and better products. Cross-laminated timber is very vibrant. New mills are being built in Europe, and that's where the technology is. The University of Graz is a bastion of utilization of wood fiber. Keep in mind that they do not have a dimension structural American Lumber Standards Board like we have here in the United States. So they don't have commodity lumber. North America is ahead of the game in that respect. But Europe, from a managing forest point of view, their plants, how they handle energy, and their product development is quite good. Necessity drives investment, and necessity is the mother of invention in Europe. Cross-laminated timber had its really gained market momentum in the European communities because, as was mentioned earlier, the sweet spot with respect to buildings is 8 to 10 stories. So just imagine in the large metropolitan areas, pick London, pick any of the large European cities that have 6-story buildings, have been utilizing cross-laminated timber to add 2 stories to those buildings. Because wood is 20% of the weight of steel and concrete and has the same strength characteristics. That's where the innovation comes from, and that's where it's fascinating. And so we believe that from a forest health point of view, managing their forests, there's a lesson. There's also another lesson here in the United States. The fires on private lands and public lands are minimal on a percentage basis. The fire situation is on the federal lands. Now, there are issues with respect to sagebrush and other forms of wildfires that are an issue and contribute to the fire situation. With respect to managed forests, there's less fire exposure than there is on the national forest, and it's purely because of the forest health. And that's what we feel, that we don't feel it's appropriate to complain about it. We feel it's appropriate to work with folks such as yourself and the Western governors and others to bring this information forward to see if we can't show you and have you look at it with the same optics that we do. Because we're operating people. Our world is the woods, our world is fires. We've had some fires that we've had to deal with, but that's all part of the forest products community. But management of the federal forest, allowing us to do our job, allowing the professionals in the Forest Service who are super, the state foresters we have, the federal foresters we have, they know what they're doing. Give them a chance to do their job. They'll do the right thing.
Thank you so much. I got to cut you off there. I'm out of time. Thank you. Mr. Joyce, do you have another question you'd like to ask?
Thank you, Chair Pingree. Dean McKeith, if you wouldn't mind, can you tell us how the advancements you witness in Arkansas's timber and wood industries impacted rural communities throughout the state? And just take a moment as well to discuss the importance of Forest Service funding in achieving those goals.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. We, as I indicated in my remarks, the first, I think, advantage and the first appeal on this, beyond the evident need to address the surplus condition, the environmental condition, there is, I think, as well, the need to address the economic vitality, the quality of life in the rural communities of the state. If you were to map in a somewhat laminated way, the presence of the forests in the state of Arkansas, the presence of sawmills and other wood product operations in those forests, you would also be mapping rural communities as well. So these are all interrelated. That's, I think, vital to this understanding. The first thing then is in terms of jobs, and whether that is the restoration, creation of new jobs for in logging and in sawmill operations, or new jobs in a sense for the development of new markets, new products and new markets. And that's where, for instance, our ability to attract a cross-laminated timber manufacturer to set up operations in the middle of the state is job creation of immediate residents around that facility, and then further and further residents out. So this is about job creation. That's one thing which can be of great benefit to rural communities. Equally then, we believe that there's a role that we can play in as a school in quality of life in those communities, and I come back to the issue of housing. So we're now working with a combination of a foundation grant as well as USFS funding to look at the issue of affordable housing in rural communities situated in the forest in such a way that we can truly provide affordable housing for those citizens of those communities in a way that makes absolute sense to them. It is made of wood, and it is essence something that they can identify with. This is the value chain that I continue to emphasize. Not only the partnership between government, industry, and university, but also the responsibility that we have to our citizens in these rural communities to really demonstrate the value of their work directly to the places where they are living. So again, the USFS funding has been critical for us all along the way. And then coming in the wake of everything that we've done, everything we've built, Forest Products Laboratory research funding just enhances that and furthers it down the line.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Chair Pingree, I know we have other folks who want to ask additional questions, so I would defer to them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let's see, Mr. Cartwright was going to go next, but I think he has disappeared. So that would bring us back to Mr. Kilmer for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just actually want to mention in response to the last comment around housing, there's actually some interesting stuff that's happening in my neck of the woods. We have another interesting product, composites, recycled composites that are being used in coordination with cross-laminated timber to build tiny homes for homeless veterans in our area. And if there's interest in learning more about that, I'd be happy to pass on some of the interesting work that's happening in our neck of the woods. I also wanted to just ask, again, trying to get at what we can do. I'm conscious of the fact that the federal government is our nation's largest builder. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity to sort of move the needle by getting the federal government to lead more in this space. On this committee, I've worked with GSA and with the Department of Defense to try to update their procurement policies to reflect the carbon benefits of wood construction. But I'd love to get a sense, and I'm not sure who to direct this to, maybe Dr. West or Dr. Shaler. What steps can the federal government take to help lead the shift towards wood construction and to solidify the role of advanced wood products as low embodied carbon building material that will be key to meeting our net zero goals?
I'm glad to take that question and really appreciate the question. The federal government has the power through the sheer number of buildings that we put in place. And many of these are not those tall 18-story buildings, but they are the lower rise buildings that we're putting in place. And whether it's through our programs with HUD for affordable housing or with FEMA to address and HUD to address replacing housing after major disasters from fires and from major storms, and where it is where we are building upon our own facilities. We had a program and a plan about 12 years ago called our Green Building Strategy. And part of that strategy that we put together with our partners identified incentives for the federal government to lean into building from wood and resurrecting those recommendations and incentives. You know, we have made some progress. I mean, within the Forest Service and other agencies and within USDA with the new Sustainability Office and the department's sustainability plan and forum, we have an opportunity to lead out on that. So we certainly can do that. Department of Defense is a huge organization with many needs and structures. So we have innovations from using, this thin nanocellulose material that's been combined with cement and concrete to create thin walls to put up to withstand blasts for temporary housing for military personnel. It's one thing. If we can develop some of these systems with these CLT panels that we can ship flat, we can move houses around the country from where we put our component parts together. So we have a wide open opportunity, in working, again, resurrecting what we started with 12 years ago in our green building strategy for federal agencies.
If I could briefly add on, part of the other issue is, and the low carbon procurement standards is details matter in terms of how those calculations are made. And I think that's an important area that details matter. And the other part is we talk to contractors and you look at that, how do they de-risk for them by having experiences? We know once a company has built these, the reduced time to market because they're comfortable with a new building technology and they can price that into their models moving forward. But demonstrations, giving these companies the experience so that they have confidence in putting more projects forward is an important component.
Thanks very much. And to the credit of some of the leaders in my state, they're doing some demonstration projects using CLT. And I mentioned the work on the veterans housing using recycled carbon fiber and CLT. It's entirely with an eye towards doing that sort of demonstration. So thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kilmer. I see Mr. Harder has joined us, so it will be Mr. Amadei if you would like to ask another round of questions, and then Mr. Harder.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just to follow up on the earlier stuff, which is in terms of your committee's work, Madam Chair, and also the members' work in terms of fuels, forest management, all that sort of stuff. If there is, and I don't know whether that's Dr. West or any of the other panel members, but if the data is out there that talks about, for instance, the carbon effects of wildland fire and also the cost to produce whatever creates a BTU or whatever of coal with existing technology versus the cost to create the same unit of measure, whether it's BTU or a ton or something like that, regarding wood pellets, I think those would be phenomenally persuasive facts when we go forth and say, hey, we need money to do this. You want clean air, and pellets are cleaner than coal, and the cost to create them is competitive if those are the facts. Oh, and by the way, all of that stuff is not going into the air in the form of the next forest fire during these drought times or climate change or whatever. I would think that would be phenomenally persuasive for us to go to our colleagues. So my request would be is if there is an entity or entities that have that information, please share that with the committee so that we can develop that and use that to make our other colleagues aware of it, and go forth and try to get the right thing done.
Congressman, we do have quite a bit of information that does those comparisons. We do quite a bit of monitoring for air quality and emissions during forest fires, and we're glad to put together some additional information and share that with you.
Thank you very much. I yield back, Madam Chair.
Great. Mr. Harder, will you, I recognize you for 5 minutes, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No questions for me. Thank you. I yield back.
I think that Mr. Brinkmeyer had a hand up. I don't know if you wanted to answer Mr. Amadei's question or just weigh in.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to share that together with Dr. West, we can help with the information on pellets and the value proposition. One of our team members supplied me the information on the last round of wildfires. It's 112 million tons of carbon that went up in the air. And so just looking at California and that issue, and then we can break it down based on forest versus wildland fires and so forth. But we'd be happy to, and there's independent valued research that's been done in this space that we can share with this committee, however you'd like to receive it, if we bring it in through Dr. West or how you would want us to bring that information forward for you.
Great. Well, we will follow up with you on that, and we will follow up on Mr. Amadei's question, because I think we could gather a lot of very useful information from these witnesses that we've had today. So we've kept you for 2 hours, and you've all been really generous with your time. Unless any members want to ask any more questions, and it looks like we can let you off the hook. So I just want to thank our witnesses for appearing in front of us today. We really appreciate your testimony. This has been an important, really helpful conversation to all of us. And as I said, we would love to follow up with you. You all have a wealth of information, and I think you're really such useful resources for our committee in making some of these challenging decisions going forward. So there are no additional questions, and we won't have any more additional comments. So this hearing is now adjourned.